Episode 343 of the Couch Coach Live podcast is a very special edition here where we will preview the 2025 NBA Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. In my personal opinion, this is going to be a great NBA Finals. Two teams with contrasting styles. It will be, to me, in my personal opinion, will be a great NBA Finals despite the small market teams that we have here. But this is what we are here in the National Basketball Association at this point. I know people wanted a sexier matchup, but I think this will be sexy and a very attractive matchup for basketball enthusiasts. Maybe not so for the casual, but if you're a guy, girl, anyone that loves the game of basketball, I think this series will suffice or satisfy your appetite. So in this preview, we'll talk about how did we get here? How did we get to this point of the NBA Finals? We'll do a little bit of a recap of their regular season matchups. We'll talk about that. We'll just talk about pretty much what Indiana Pacers, pretty much their calling card, what is like their biggest strength in this series. We'll also talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder's strengths as well in this matchup. And then we'll talk about two keys, but a singular key for both teams for them to potentially win an NBA championship. And then we'll wrap it up with my expert opinion, quote unquote, expert meaning on the couch coach sense, but you know what we're at. So without further ado, what we're gonna do, we're gonna kick that intro and we'll be right back here as we preview the 2025 NBA Finals. Yes, and we like that. Big shout out to our guy, Big Kirko. So without further ado, let's get into the 2025 NBA Finals preview with the Indiana Pacers and the OKC Thunder. So I know you guys think to yourself, okay, how did we get here at this point of the NBA regular season? So first off, we got to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. A phenomenal season. 64-18 record. They also set an NBA record with a 12.9 average point differential that eclipsed the 1971-1972 LA Lakers. They were led by SGA, who averaged 32.7 points per game, was named the league MVP. Just been a phenomenal run. You think to yourself, and even going into this game one, Oklahoma City is 80-14. No, not 80-14, 80-18, pardon me. So they won 80 games and lost 18 combined regular season and postseason thus far. So they've been rolling. And also their Eastern Conference opponent, the Indiana Pacers. Matter of fact, before we go to the Pacers, this is the Oklahoma City Thunder's first NBA Finals appearance since 2012. You guys remember that was the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden led team that lost to the Miami Heat in the 2012 NBA Finals. Now shifting the focus to the Indiana Pacers. This team has returned to the NBA Finals since the year 2000. That was the Reggie Miller, Jalen Rose-led team that unfortunately lost to the Los Angeles Lakers in 2000. Feels like yesterday, but it was many moons ago. It was like 25 years ago. But hey, it was a great time to be alive in the summer of 2000. But I'll digress on that point. So this is their first appearance since 2000. They had a 50-32 record. That's the best. That's the best record they've had, as far as from a 50-win standpoint, since 2014. Their first 50-win season since 2014. Indiana's kind of one of those teams that's, we talked about like SGA as far as the one head and shoulders, 32 points per game. This is more so like a committee. Obviously, you looking at their leading scorer is Pascal Siakam, who was also named the Larry Bird Eastern Conference Finals MVP, who averaged 20.2 points per game in the regular season. And then also Tyrese Haliburton, who had 18.6 points per game in the regular season, averaged 9.2 assists during the regular season. So you look at these teams, they come in a little bit different. Obviously, you look at OKC coming in, 64-win team, just ran through the league, 21-9 versus the Eastern Conference. Their only loss was against the Milwaukee Bucks many, many moons ago. As far as that's concerned. So how did we get here? And then also, let's just talk about the two matchups that they had during the regular season. The Thunder traveled to Indiana on the day after Christmas in 2024 on December the 26th. That was a really interesting game where the Thunder won 120 to 114. They closed out the game in a 17-7 run to close out the game. SGA had 45 points in that game, and while Haliburton only had 4 points and 8 assists. And then these teams matched up again on March 29th, where you had the Thunder dominating this game, 132 to 111. So pretty much how that game essentially was won. Thunder won. They had 73 combined points in the second and third quarter. They hit 17 threes. I think they shot 47% from the three. So they had a very hot night in that game. And SGA, once again, 33 points, led all scorers in that matchup on March 29th. So let's talk about the Indiana Pacers. Pretty much, I think, in my personal opinion, their strength. More so kind of like the calling card. Let's just talk about essentially, like I talked about it earlier, their team scoring back committee. You have 6 guys on this Indiana Pacers team that average double figures, which is phenomenal. Like I talked about it earlier. Pascal, we talked about Pascal, Siakam. So he and Pascal, and this is going to be more so the numbers from the postseason. I know we talked about earlier about the Pascal and Haliburton's regular season numbers, but now we're going to shift focus and we'll talk about their bounce scoring attack in the playoffs. So these will be playoff stats for the Indiana Pacers that I'll discuss. Like I said about Pascal Siakam, as I mentioned earlier, was the Larry Bird Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Led them with 21.1 points per game, and that is in the postseason. Haliburton, 18.8. Miles Turner, 15.2 points per game. Aaron Nesmith, 14.1. Andrew Nembhard, 12.8. And then Benedict Mathurin with 10.4 points per game. And also the Indiana Pacers lead the league in fast break points, averaging 17.5 points per game. So, and we talked about as far as the offensive output of the Indiana Pacers, the contrast as I mentioned earlier. Now we got to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder championship level defense. Wow. This team, and when you think about it, they led the league in steals with 10.3 steals per game, forced turnovers with 11 forced turnovers. They ranked second in blocks with 5.7 blocks per game. You got 2 guys who were on all defensive teams. You had Lou Dart was on the first team, and then also Jalen Williams was on the second team. And quiet as kept, I think if Because now with the postseason awards, if you miss a certain amount of games, you are not eligible for it. But you really could have made a case if they would have been eligible. Like Alex Caruso would have probably made a team. Chet Holmgren as well, and then even quiet as kept, Isaiah Hartenstein could have potentially. So you literally could have had 5 guys being on all defensive squads, and that's one thing. They have such a tremendous defense. And you just think about it, they thrive on ball pressure. It's pretty much awareness as far as all over the court, essentially. Aggressive disruption. And actually, they led the league with 1,722 deflections. And that is the most ever since that stat was recorded dating back to 2016. So they're just a swarming defense. They're just ones, they're really handsy. They will collapse and plug lanes in. So it's going to be definitely a difficult, they play suffocating defense. They just play pretty much, it's just extremely aggressive. If I want to put it into a football term, it's almost like they have a blitzing type of offense where they attack. When we think about like football defenses, you're attacking the pocket. You're collapsing the pocket. They're collapsing the passing lanes where you have those opportunities to make plays. They're collapsing at the ball. So that's one thing too. If you want to put their defense compared to like a football type of phraseology, that's where you'll look at it from that standpoint. And then you think about it and how they was able to suffocate these teams. And then even I love the quote from Anthony Edwards, obviously the Minnesota Timberwolves superstar, pretty much said that their defense are 15 puppets on one string. And I think that's probably the perfect example to kind of to describe their swarming defense. So that's where we look at how we talked about how the Pacers are really the offensive centric. The Thunder are offensive centric to an extent, but they're more of a defensive. They're pretty much their bread and butter is their defense, and I deem it as championship level defense. So that's concerned. So when I look at the Indiana Pacers, I think one thing I look at in this matchup, some things that not necessarily the keys to a win, but more so kind of like the fascination of what could potentially happen in this series, or what makes me curious on how they'd be able to overcome it. So you look at Haliburton's playmaking ability. Will he be able to kind of crack that code defensively of the Thunder's defensive puzzle? Can he find and exploit openings against OKC's relentless pressure defense? So it's kind of just one of those where it's just like I think of Haliburton, and like I said, we made the football reference earlier. Similar to this one, well, can he avoid like that blitz? Could he find passing lanes to get guys in scoring position? So it's almost eerily similar to that if I want to put it in a football term. So that's what I look at from that standpoint. And then I think the wings for the Pacers are going to vote very critical, especially with their ability, their two-way as far as. So I'll talk about as far as Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard. Both of them have the ability to contribute on both ends, offensive and defensive. As we talked about it, they are part of that six guys that are averaging double figures for the Indiana Pacers. So offensively, will they be the beneficiaries of like that potentially chink in the armor of Oklahoma City defense, potentially, where we talked about as far as Haliburton being able to kind of find guys for scoring opportunities? I think these two guys, if they're able to be successful in that far as cracking OKC's defensive code, I think they'll be the bigger beneficiaries of that if this was to happen. So I definitely think they could provide an offensive spark for the Indiana Pacers, potentially. And then I think defensively, they're going to be really have a task when you look at Nembhard and also Nesmith. they're going to be switching between SGA and Jalen Williams. So it's going to be kind of interesting of how that will happen as far as how the defensive matchups. Because if you think about it, in the March matchup, Nimhard guarded SGA, and then Neesmith guarded Jalen Williams. So it's kind of one of those where I know it's going to be a switch. Can they kind of keep those guys corralled? Can they get to a point where will they potentially get in foul trouble potentially of that? So it's kind of things. Will they have that kind of defensive discipline where, hey, they don't really get, as far as get in foul trouble, because they're definitely going to be needed in this matchup, especially how they'll probably be switching. So it's going to be kind of one of the things where if they are able to essentially don't get themselves in foul trouble and, as far as just pretty much containing both Williams and SGA. So that's going to be it's an arduous task, but I think that's kind of something that I look for in this matchup. So I look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. Obviously, we talked about the Pacers and their depth. We having like 6 guys in double figures, which is tremendous. But I find it weird. And we know OKC, they run potentially 9 deep in this rotation. You just look at it from that standpoint, that second unit. And these just the 3 guys that I think are going to have a tremendous impact in this series, because they have other guys on this bench. But I think I want to look at these 3 guys essentially. Alex Caruso, Aaron Wiggins, and Isaiah Joe, and Cason Wallace. They bring so much energy and production, and not necessarily as far as I know we talked about the Pacers with the 6 guys in double figures. These aren't guys that can average a double figure in a sense, but more so in this type of series, I can see them having 10 points, 10 points off the bench, 15 points off the bench, potentially 20 points off the bench. So obviously Caruso averages 8.8 per game. Even like I talked about it, Isaiah Joe had 11 points in a closeout game in the Western Conference Finals, and then also Cason Wallace had a 11-point game in Game 4 of the Western semifinals on May the 11th. So those guys, I think they could provide that spark, and they're ones where I think on any given night, they can give you that production. They can give you double-digit production. And sometimes it may not be needed in this series, but I think, especially like in those home games or what have you, it just give them sort of a spark. So I definitely think they have an opportunity to have like that breakout series in a sense where I can see in a game where Caruso may have like 15. Cason Wallace may have 12 in one game. Aaron Wiggins, he potentially could have 14, 15, or what have you. So those 4 guys I think is definitely going to be huge. I know I think I mentioned 3, but it's really the 4 guys in Alex Caruso, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, and Cason Wallace. So I think another big advantage for the Oklahoma City Thunder is going to be on the rebounding. When you look at Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, I think it's going to be really interesting of how they will perform as far as on the rebounding edge for it. So Chet Holmgren is averaging 8.6 rebounds per game, and Hartenstein is averaging 7.9 rebounds per game. So that's the thing where I look at from that, where I think, if I remember this correct, I think Chet had double-digit rebounds this season. So I definitely think in this series, they're going to have a rebound edge over Siakam and also Miles Turner. So pretty much I think that's how essentially that this series is going to break down. So I want to give you guys my prediction for this year's NBA Finals. And I do have the Oklahoma City Thunder in 6 games. I do think that the Pacers could steal a game in Oklahoma City. I would not be surprised if the series moves to Indiana, where this series could be tied. But I definitely think Thunder's defense is going to wear those guys down. I think about those two matchups, obviously, in that December game, because they didn't have Caruso in that game as well. So, and I think Chet and Alex Caruso didn't play in that matchup as well. And then a March matchup that pretty much was a blowout. I think in this matchup, where I think what's going to ultimately happen, I think obviously the defense is going to be tremendous. So I definitely they're going to wear down the Pacers in this series. And then I just think just the trio of SGA, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren, I think they will capitalize on their matchups individually. And I think that's going to be too much for the Pacers. And then on top of, if you have, like I talked about earlier, as far as the bench, if you have that, when I talked about those four guys, and if any of those guys can kind of get double figures, I don't necessarily think the bench need a double-digit guy. All four of those guys got to have double digits in those games. I think if you have one guy have a double digits in one game, I'm just giving you an example. If you have like Alex Caruso, game 1 scores 15, Aaron Wiggins, game 2, 15, Isaiah Joe, 10, or Casey Wallace, 14, 15, or just any double digit scoring individually in each of those games, I think it definitely bode well for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I do have them winning in 6 games. So this wraps up our NBA preview. We'll be back tomorrow night on Wednesday, June the 4th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will wrap up episode 343 of our NBA Finals preview, a special edition here. And we'll catch you guys on Wednesday, June 4th, live at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And this is a wrap here. And we'll catch you guys on our next episode. And we're out.